everybody, well, welcome to Wild Boy Movies, the place to talk movies, and today we're going to be reviewing Civil War, an A24 drama on America basically at war with itself. Right now I'm going to have some information up on screen, like director, runtime, and PAA rating. All of that will be up on screen for you to read right now. But be sure to hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and comment down below your thoughts on Civil War. But without further ado, let's get right into the pros. Alright, starting off, I gotta go ahead and praise director Alex Garland because I think he did a pretty good job with the direction of this movie. There were a lot of things in Civil War that I think Alex Garland did a good job with, that the film ended up being a pretty good movie in my opinion. And also, as an A24 movie itself, I thought it was pretty good. Now, I've barely seen any A24 movies. The only one that I've seen is Marcel the Shell with Shoes On. So Civil War was the second film out of A24's library that I ended up watching. And there are still a bunch of other A24 movies that I do want to see, like Everything Everywhere All at Once. And basically, I felt like A24 movies were kind of like artsy films, movies that would get nominated for the Oscars. But as an A24 film itself, I thought it was a pretty good one and definitely got me curious to see what other films they have that might end up being good movies. I also gotta go ahead and praise the story in this movie because it's essentially the story of a woman who is a photographer who takes pictures of this war going to Washington, D.C. for basically an interview with the President of the United States on the current state of the Civil War. I thought the story in here was done pretty well, and although not an Oscar level amazing story, it was still one that I found myself pretty interested in all throughout the entire runtime of the movie, especially when we have a bunch of likable characters in this movie. And that perfectly segues into me talking about the cast of this movie because I thought they did a pretty good job in this movie. I thought Wagner Morris and Stephen McKinley did a pretty good job in this movie, but there were two people in here that really stood out. Well, one, Kristen Dunst, this photographer who has to go on this journey to Washington, D.C. I thought she was a pretty good character in the movie and definitely one that I was definitely interested in to watch go through his journey. But really, the actress who really stole the show for me was Cailee Spaeny. She is on a roll lately, whether that be in Alien Romulus or even in this movie. She's doing a pretty good job to the point where I'm curious to see what she does next in Hollywood. She's essentially this photographer who looks up to Kristen Dunst's character and wants to be a photographer in the Civil War. I thought that story worked so well in this movie, and she just did a great job in this movie that it was just the biggest standout of the entire cast. I also liked how this movie focused in on the characters rather than this larger civil war that is going on in America. That's something that I will talk about later on, but I really liked how they took the time to not only get us invested with these characters, but to also to get us to care about them. And spending that much time with these characters on their road trip to Washington, D.C., it just worked in its advantage. And I also like how they added text on the screen to let you know how far our characters are from Washington, D.C., whether that be 800 miles, 500 miles, or 200 miles. That was just a nice touch to add with this movie. And although you don't get a lot of action in this movie, there's this one scene in the movie where our characters are being confronted by this military guy, I don't really know. And it's basically the scene in the trailer where this guy asks, "What type of American are you?" That was such a tense scene that might honestly be my favorite scene out of the entire movie. But really all the action is saved for the final act in the movie when our characters are in Washington, D.C. And the action we do see in here is kind of brutal. I'm not going to as far as like something that you'd see out of a horror movie, but it is brutal and realistic because this is a realistic take on what if America had another civil war. Like the action, although not that much in the movie, still pretty good to see. And on top of that, I also love how they integrated like characters taking pictures because our main characters are photographers in this movie. And I liked how during the middle of the action, whenever there is action, the movie would stop, take a freeze frame, and snap a picture, like, and seeing the photo that our characters have taken in this particular moment. That was also like a very cool touch that I liked in the movie, especially with our characters being photographers. That style really worked for me. So yeah, I ended up enjoying this movie. This was a movie that I saw its trailer in front of Godzilla X Kong The New Empire and wanted to see, and now that it arrived on Max, I gave it a watch, hoping that it would be a good movie, and my expectations were met. But it was far from like at least a great movie, which leads me to my cons. Starting off, I do think there are like some slower moments in the movie, particularly towards the middle. Like they definitely feel like it's dragging to get to like a certain runtime that they need in order to. I don't even know what I'm saying there. But yeah, there were just some scenes that felt like it was there just to pad up the runtime a little bit. Still pretty good, but it did feel a bit lengthy at times. Although I did put this as like a pro, it's kind of like a mixed, but genuinely, I wanted to know like, why did this America go into this civil war? Like, we don't get those answers in this movie at all. Like, we don't get any hints to what happened or a definitive answer to what happened, but it's just kind of like an interpretation on what you think actually happened to cause this civil war to happen. And lastly, this movie just ends abruptly. Like, there's a certain moment in this movie where it feels like the movie should continue on for like 5 more minutes to follow up on like this aftermath, but the movie just ends right there. Like, there is no like follow up to what happened to the US president. Like, as soon as the photo is taken of the aftermath, it just cuts to credits as the photo is being processed. But putting aside those cons, I thought this was a pretty good movie. It definitely got me interested in seeing some more A24 movies. Now, that's not a definitive confirmation. I probably have some interest in seeing other movies from A24. But this ended up being a pretty good movie that I'm considering watching some more A24 movies and definitely could review them on the channel. So for my scorecard, I'm gonna give Civil War 3.5 stars, with the score out of 10 being 7.5 out of 10, with the percentage being 75%, with a grade of C, with my final verdict being an intense A24 movie. But that was my thoughts on Civil War. I want to hear from you guys. What are your guys' thoughts on this movie? Go ahead and leave that down in the comments section. And while you're at it, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next video. And have a great day.